Okay, let's look at a typical example of how to create these class intervals so we can figure out how much data is in each of our classes. So here's a typical question. They give us some data. They give us a starting point, and they want us to have a certain number of classes. In this case, I think they said 7. Well, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're doing 5 classes. And we have to figure out everything. We have to figure out the width and so on and so forth. So the first thing we need to do is get this data into technology and sort it. So I'm going to highlight the table, Control C, go over here, Control V, and there's my data. First thing we want to do is sort it. So go to Data, Sort Range, sort the range by the column A to Z. And now it's sorted from smallest to biggest. And that's going to help us when we have to count how many are in each interval. Okay, now in order to calculate the interval, the class width, we have to do the range of our data and then divide that by how many classes we want. And in this case, we want 5. Now, if you're using like a TI-84, it has, I think, a range feature. But oftentimes Excel, and in this case Google Sheets, doesn't do range. Instead, you have to do max minus min. All right, so we can calculate the max, and we can calculate the min, and then we can do the range from those. So simple formulas, right? Equal, and we start typing in, and we go to max, and then there's the one we want. And then it already defaults to A1 to A25 because it's smart enough to kind of know, hey, this is the only set of data on the page. This is probably what you want to run your max on. You go, yeah, sure, thanks. And then same thing for min. We'll choose min. And again, it knows what the data is. But like if you wanted to, you could just click on A and get everything in column A. So that way, if you put data in there later, it'll catch however much data you have. But anyways, and then the range is really simply, that's just max minus min. So we just go equals, and we click on the cell where the max is, and then we do minus, and click on the cell where the min is, and that will give us our range. And now we have it set up. In fact, if we do this one, if we change this one to A:A, like the other example, now anytime we have a new set of data, we can just delete this column, paste our new set of data, and these 3 things will automatically recalculate with our new set of data. So we've kind of created our own little max min range calculator for us. But in any case, here's our range. Now for this question, they want 5 intervals. So we have to take this, this number and divide by 5. So it's going to equal this number divided by 5 and 7.6. Now, here's where it gets tricky when we do these things. Because you may not have noticed, but here's our smallest is at 53. And if you go back to this question, you'll notice that the first class starts at 49.5. It's smaller than 53. And the last class needs to have an upper bound that is bigger than 91. So let's say that when we did this range, it came out perfect. It was like 40. So we divided by 5, and the answer was exactly 8. Well, if you made your class widths 8, but the bottom one was a little bit smaller than your smallest number, because it has to be to catch it, right? So even if it was 52.5, then when you got to the top one would have been like 90.5, and it would have missed the max of 91. So in order to make sure that all of your data is captured in all of your intervals, because we know the smallest interval is going to be a little bit, the lower bound is going to be a little bit smaller than our min, and the upper bound is going to be a little bit bigger than our max for the last class. That means the entire span of all of our data that we're collecting is going to be bigger than our range, the total range of our data. So that's why we always have to round up when we calculate the whole range divided by number of classes, right? So we did 38 divided by 5, we got 7.6. We would have to round that up to 8. And you're thinking, well, of course, 7.6 would round up to 8. Yeah, but like I said, If our range was 40 and our answer was actually 8, then we would have to still round that up to 9. So no matter what the number is, you always have to round up to the next largest whole number. So if it was 7.1, it would still round up to 8. If it was 7.2, you would round up to 8. But if it was exactly 7, you would still round up to 8, right? Or if it was exactly 8, you would round up to 9. So you always have to round up to the next largest integer. In this case, 7.6 would round up to 8. So now we know our interval size is 8. So we have a class width of 10. Well, how did I mess that up? Oh, I see. I didn't pay attention. This question, they actually told us what the class width was. But some variations on these questions, instead of them telling you that they want you to have a predetermined class width of 10, they ask you to calculate it. And that's what we just did. We calculated it. So if you get one that asks you to calculate it, that's what you do. In this case, they tell you it's 10. So we know we're going to go up by 10 each time. So with 10, the math is pretty easy. We know that it starts at 49.5. We add 10, it goes to 59.5. Oops. And then this will also be 59.5. And then the next one will be up by 10 again, 69.5, and so on and so forth. That's how we get these. Right? But what if the question had messier numbers and it wasn't so easy to add 10 each time? Let's look at how we could have technology help us with that. So let's look at this example where it wants us to use 7 classes. So again, it tells us how many classes we need, but it doesn't tell us what the class width is, right? So this one we really have to figure out. It tells you right here the formula is max minus min divided by number of classes. So now we need to put this data into our Excel spreadsheet. So I'm going to click on A and hit delete, and you'll see that all of my answers have now gone away because there's no data left. Now I'm going to select this data, Control C, click on the first cell, Control V, and there's my new set of data. And you'll see that everything recalculated because I changed these formulas to be A:A instead of just A1 through A25 or whatever it was. Because if I had left it like that, it wouldn't have captured the bottom numbers. Excuse me, I'm suffering from a cold right now. Okay. But in any case, there's my new max, there's my new min, there's my new range, and then this is wrong now because this was divided by 5. We want it divided by 7. So there we go. Now we have divided by 7. And I just want to double check this is a whole number. Oh, look at that. It came out to be a whole number. So they did it to us again where they gave us a tripping point of when we calculated divided by 7, we got exactly 59. Well, you'll notice that our smallest number, maybe you didn't notice, our smallest number was 2. And when we come down here, it starts with 1.5. So if we did exactly 59 each time, right, and didn't round up to 60, by the time we got to the last class, the upper bound of the last class, it wouldn't be large enough to capture 415. It would stop at like, I think 414.5 if I can do the math quickly, which I normally can't. Okay, so we have to round this up to 60. So again, we've got a nice round number, so the math is pretty easy. But we can still let technology do the math for us a little bit better. We know that 1.5 is the lower bound of the first class, right? 1.5. The lower bound of the next class is always one lower bound plus class width. We talked about this in my other video, that if you just do the differences between the lower bounds, that will be the class width. So with a class width of 60, the difference between these two numbers has to be 60. So that means if we just add 60, this one has to be 61.5. All right, so there's 61.5. Now, in order to get the rest, we can add 60 each time, but we can let technology do this for us. We can just, okay, so here's my starting point, 1.5. This is going to equal the cell above. So I click on that. There's my D6, and I'm going to add 60 to it. You see how that now says 61.5? Now I want Excel to, or in this case, Google Sheets, same thing, repeat this process, repeat this pattern. So if I just move my cursor to the bottom right, so it turns, goes from my hand to the little black X, and you click, hold, and drag, it will repeat that pattern however many times you want it to. It'll just keeps adding 60 over and over and over and over and over again. So now you know what numbers to put in all of your lower bounds. So you could sit here and kind of go side by side with these. And then go, all right, so there's 61.5. This is 121.5. This one's 181.5, and so on and so forth. And then you also realize that this lower bound is the same as this upper bound, right? So that's going to be 61.5, 121.5, 181.5, and so on and so forth. So that's how you can, quickly get all of the upper and lower bounds. Now, to figure out frequencies and relative frequencies, it's all about counting up how many things you have in each of these. So again, we have to sort our data. So we click on A, we go data, we sort our range, A to Z. So there's smallest to biggest. For instance, my first one goes from 1.5 to 61.5. So this is what I do to make my life easy. I just click and hold, and I'm going to highlight everything up to 61.5. So 51. You'll notice down here, I don't know why it came off. Down here, it gives me a sum. But if you click on this little arrow, you can change it to count. And now it tells me I've highlighted 17 things. So I know my answer has to be 17. And then I want 61.5 through 121.5. So that's 65 up through 121.5. So not 123, right? That's bigger than 121.5. I got to stop right there. And look, it tells me my count is 7. Aha, count is 7. Now, if you're doing Excel instead of Google Sheets, I'm going to get rid of this thing so it stops doing that. At the bottom, it has like 3 little automatic things. So when you highlight some stuff at the bottom, in Excel, it will give you count, sum, and average, I think is what it defaults to. But you can click on those and you can change them. But it kind of gives you the ones you already need all at the same time rather than having to just have one. But it's the same thing, right? You can highlight and it tells you how many you have. And that makes counting a lot easier. And then once you have frequencies, relative frequency, remember, is just that number divided by how many we have. And again, you could highlight all of them. I mean, it's pretty obvious when it starts in 1 and it ends at 30, you have 30 of them. But in case your data didn't start at number 1, maybe you had a little label at the top that said what the data was, and then it ends at 31. And if you don't want to remember, oh gosh, it's always going to be that minus 1, you do the little highlight trick. It tells you there's 30. Okay, so now my relative frequency is going to be 17 divided by 30, so equals 17 divided by 30. And there it is, 0.5666666, right? And it says 3 decimals, so that would be 0.567 because we'd round the third one. Now, here's a thing to help with rounding, right? If you struggle with rounding, as a lot of people do, click on the cell where you have the number that you need to round. Up here at the top, you've got where it can increase and decrease decimals. So let's just decrease it down until it only shows 3. And there we go. It's rounded to the third decimal place. And now I've got my answer. So when I need to do the next one, so now in this, right, clicking in this cell, we do equals 7 divided by 30. It's already formatted to keep it to 3 decimals, and there's my answer. Oh, sorry, you can't see this. There are my answers of 0.56 and 0.233. As far as creating the histogram goes, I wouldn't bother. I mean, you can make it in technology, but this first bar has to have 17 things. So that one goes to 17, that one goes to 21, that one goes to 17, that one goes to 2. So we know it's between this one and this one. Then the second one has to go to 7. Well, that's at 7, and that's at 7, right? These two are the same. These two are the same. So it looks like once I figure out how many are in the 241 to 301 and a half, I'll know whether it's this one that has none or this one that has 5. So it's basically just a process of elimination. Which one does it fit? If you want to actually make a histogram, it depends on which one you're in. If you're in Google Sheets or Excel, you insert. For Excel, you would insert, and then it would be like a chart or something, and you would go from there. Okay, but that should be everything you need to do to tackle these types of questions.